I felt like talking to Matt Medeiros about podcasting, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about elements of a great podcast. That's why you're here. Welcome to Scratchpad. I'm Chris Brogan, your host. I'm going to throw on this cool music while people start showing up. I didn't throw the great music on, Matt. I wrecked it. Well, let's start with a blown beginning because I only do a video show every single day and still don't know how to use the tools. Matt Medeiros, buddy, how are you? Good to see you.
Chris, thanks for having me here. Happy to talk about my favorite thing in life to do, podcasting.
Seems like only 16 hours ago or so, you and I were hanging out.
Seems like only yesterday.
So you work at a new company called CASTOS. You're part of the team over at CASTOS, which is a podcast hosting and services company. Is that a fair way of explaining it?
100%. Podcast hosting and services is what we do. Help people host their podcasts and make it sound better too.
This isn't paid or anything. This is not an ad or anything, but while I was listening to you educate all my people that I work with at Owner Media Group, which was great on a private webinar that, you paid for to all their tickets to go to. I was hearing you talk just, glancingly about your shows that you do, your podcast. And I was like, specifically your local show, because I think you also didn't know that I was going to be super as popular as it is. So can you start there? Give people the sense of it. And also, where do they go find the show? Because they're going to want to.
Yeah. So the website is southcoast.fm, southcoast.fm. So the South Coast of Massachusetts, about an hour and a half-ish away from Chris. It's a collection of 7 cities and communities put together, and it's called the South Coast. And what happened was I've been podcasting largely at the internet for the last 8 years, talking about WordPress, talking about, entrepreneurship online. And my family has had deep business roots in the South Coast of Massachusetts for 50 plus years.
Car dealership, right?
Car dealership. We were one of the first Mazda dealerships that my grandfather started back in the late 70s. And then all the way through the 90s, we were a General Motors dealership. And then we got out of the General Motors before the big financial crisis and before General Motors went bankrupt, of course. Started a local digital agency with my father, and we were, doing websites and stuff for many years. And then, entrepreneurship, the web. I mean, my God, if you said podcast to somebody locally 4 years ago, their eyes would cross and they'd be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, we just got on Facebook. I don't even know what a podcast thing is. And then a local accelerator came to town called E4All, and there was a renewed energy or a new energy for entrepreneurship on the South Coast. People are like hip to it. People are talking about building businesses. They were pitch contests. They were giving money away. It was Shark Tank, but without the teeth is how they like to say it. And I said, you know what? The time is right. Like, I do this thing already online with, internet people around the world. Let me do the same thing here on the South Coast. And for good reason. I give the reason why. So it wasn't just like, does Matt need another podcast? No,
right.
Matt does not need another podcast. Matt does 50 podcasts with 50 YouTube channels. I don't need another one. But what I've realized as I've gotten older, that world domination, selling things online is taking the back seat way back. I now have 3 young children. And what I've realized that growing up in the car business in the local community, roots were pretty deep. With our family, with people that we knew in the area. And that business afforded me tons of opportunity growing up, which I didn't even realize growing up. When you're young, you're like, I don't want to go to work, Dad. Everyone's going to the beach and having a fun time. And you're making me go wash 300 cars at 90 degrees out. And I'm only 12, and it was that business lesson, that life lesson. But it also opened up opportunities. If I needed jobs, if I needed to know people, it was a great way to know people. And I realized I don't have that connection anymore personally. I spend time in the community helping other businesses and such, especially through COVID. But I was like, I want to build something that will hopefully open doors up for my children as they get older. So like I look at this podcast and I know that I will literally be doing this podcast for the next 18 years minimum. Right? Because when they go to college, maybe I'll stop. Maybe they look at me and they say, "Dad, what a dumb idea it was for you to do a podcast." I don't know, but that's my investment in this right now.
It's very interesting to me. And one of the things that I find interesting about doing a local show, as you said, we put our eyes towards the internet. All of my friends live somewhere else, basically. So I don't have any real connection to the local community, except that my newsletter, like all my downstairs neighbors, I live in a factory building. Some of my neighbors on the first floor like what I do. Some of my neighbors in a few other parts of the town, kind of know what I do. And that's it. Everybody else, I think they think I'm a drug dealer or a recluse.
Yeah.
Maybe both. So when I look at what you have going there, by the way, it's interesting because, you've got conversations about creativity. You've got one about a beauty and barbershop. You had the bar people talking about, how they're switching to online. The topic matter is interesting to me. It's interesting because, again, it's a local show. You get to talk about really interesting stuff over there. How are you right now kind of curating that? And how are you, especially in these troubling times, how are you finding what new kinds of guests to put on the show to build it together?
Yeah. So sort of the premise of the show is, where we sit geographically. The podcast is called We Are Here. And it's sort of, to play of like when you look at a map and it says you are here. And the concept is to say like, we are here, like the South Coast is here, because oftentimes what I found, right, as somebody who ran a digital business day to day, an agency building WordPress websites, I couldn't, there was no top tier developer talent down here on the South Coast because they were all leaving for Boston. They were all leaving for New York, California, Austin, Texas. Like these kids graduated and they left. So we built up a lot of homegrown talent here. Same thing with like businesses, people, we got Amazon down the street a few years back. It's just a distribution center, but people talked about it like, oh, Amazon's in town. It's just a warehouse where they ship things from. It's not Amazon headquarters, but we pitched it. And sort of the sense was, look, we're only an hour south of Boston, 30 minutes from Providence, Rhode Island, minutes from the islands, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. There's stuff happening here. Like we're at the central point. At one point, New Bedford was the whaling capital of the world many, many, many years ago. And it's still one of the largest fishing ports, if not one of the most profitable fishing ports in the world too. So we have that going for us. And that was the premise, is to talk to people and say, what is it like to run a business down on the South Coast? What's it like to get real estate? What's it like to find talent? Because I've been faced with all of these challenges. So I know these other business owners in my local area would want to talk about it too. There are some, and the South Coast is 7 towns and cities, but you wouldn't know it if you went into any of these other towns and cities. They all like to, largely talk about themselves.
City pride only, not the region. I'd never heard the term until you said it, So Massachusetts, North Shore, South Shore, when I first ever came to Mass, people said to me, you will totally know the day you meet a South Shore person. Yeah. And I had no horse in this race. I'm from Maine. I come down, I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. You totally know when somebody in Massachusetts is from the South Shore. But that's what I'd ever last heard. So South Coast, New Bedford, Fall River, I can't name all the rest. That area, Taunton, Bridgewater, is that all that area?
Bridgewater is a little too north, but certainly Taunton touches the edge of it. Wareham, Fairhaven, Dartmouth, where I grew up, Westport, all of that stuff. But everyone, this was the thing. It's like, look, people, there's 100,000 people in Fall River. There's 100,000 people in New Bedford. There's 30, 20, 50,000 in all the surrounding towns. It's not a big area. So let's not try to own everything, while all these businesses look at us and say, you know what, screw it. We're going to Boston, or we're going to Providence, or somewhere else. It took us, the city or the town, the state, years, Chris, and you probably have heard this, to get the train. Like the train is now finally coming down to Fall River and New Bedford, and we'll be able to hop on a train and go to Boston. And now I think what people are going to start to realize is we have literal transportation access now to the big city, and maybe that'll change the thinking. So that was the premise of it. And I find content now because this is catching up to people. Like the internet and marketing is catching up to people, and they're getting hip to podcasts. They still don't know how to be a good podcast guest, right? They still, one of my first interviews, was with a woman who runs and owns a pretty big exercise. I don't want to, not firm, but like it's called boutique fitness. They're physical trainers, but she's got tremendously successful, many locations down here. And she's like, I've never done a podcast. I'll do a podcast with you. And it's easy. We just hop on Skype and we record. No problem. And I'm used to talking to folks like you and maybe people watching the show who just know what it is to just have a decent mic and just do a podcast. We got on the call and all I heard in the background was like loud techno music, people screaming. I go, where are you? She's like, oh, I'm right next door to my spin studio. I'm like,
I'm in the studio, right?
Yeah, this is not going to work. And I've definitely found some challenges with trying to host a podcast with people who just don't quite get it yet. But It's also fun to like experience people who are doing this for the first time.
I think so too. I think it helps us stay fresh on learning how to guide people into that. You know, a good host is a good guide, right? So a good host has to, warm them up. And in my video show, one of the things that we started doing is that with Carrie as my co-host, she said, I want you to look the best you can for the episode. I really want you to, feel afterwards, wow, you look really good. Because I would be like, someone would have their cam like this or something. And we'd be like, maybe you could clear some of that air over your head. Maybe you don't need that. Or they would do witness protection lighting, which is they stand right behind a window behind them, and we'd be like, your black, screen to us. And I didn't know that you're supposed to do that. Like, I didn't know you're supposed to do it. Let me help you make it look and sound way better than it does right now. So now we're fussy. We're like, do you have earphones? Can you go get a good mic? I want to go back to the setup of making a show, because even probably since doing CASTOS, and again, this isn't an ad for CASTOS. This is, me talking to you because it's a good time in this. And I'll bring up CASTOS while we talk. I want to talk about if you were going to start yet another show. Your South Coast show is done. You said, screw it. I can't stand these people. I want to hear the letter R ever again in my life. So I'm going to have to go back to a non-Massachusetts crowd. What do you do to tell people to set up a show? Like, what's the one pager of it's time to make a show? Here's how I think about making a show.
Yeah. I do it because I love the conversation around it. And I do it because I love the exploration of a topic, right? So that's number one. When we were talking yesterday, Chris, in the webinar, and I'm sure you see this too, it's, you see the typical podcast come across your Twitter feed, or somebody asks you to be on it. And it's okay. Like, look, you got to take a step back. Everybody starts somewhere. But I think a lot of people get into podcasts because, one, they think that they're just going to make Joe Rogan money, right? Or advertisement running. And it's just not going to happen right away. I'm not saying you'll never do it, but it won't happen right away. And a lot of people just try to get into it because they're like, I think I can just direct them to my book sale, my agency services, or my widget that I sell, which is, again, it's a fine route. Like, if that's what you want to do and it works for you, that's okay. That is not what drives me to create a podcast. And I'll tell you why, is because most people get into like episode 12 of, that journey, and they're like, this sucks. This is a lot harder to do. So you definitely want to do the cliche of pick something that you love. That's number one. And number two, no need for all the fancy bells and whistles. Using a Fuji camera, stupidly expensive microphone here, goes into another stupidly expensive box, which plugs into my stupidly expensive computer. You don't need it to do a great podcast. You invest $50, $60 in a microphone, ATR 2020 or something like that on Amazon. It's Prime Day, so you can get some good deals. You don't have to go crazy to start the podcast, but you do want to care about it, and you want to think of the audience first and foremost as you're creating great content. That's what's going to help get this show, off the ground. I just registered another domain 2 weeks ago, as if I needed another podcast, Chris. But I'm thinking about going down the route of video gaming and going into that space. Because, again, I have children. So I was like, oh God, in 4 years, do you think they'd want to do a podcast with
dad?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you my favorite one of those going on right now. It's not a podcast. It's just live Twitch streaming. I love Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income. Pat Flynn, he and his kids, I have joy watching them because you get to watch Pat parent. you know, because they're kids. So if they get upset, you get to watch them like lose their crap on video, and you're like, because it's not your kid. Heidi Garland's here, but I just want to end that statement. But watching it is a master class in how you can really blow out a really cool Twitch studio and look like, you know, Ninja on Fortnite, you know, for easy work, and it's worth it. So I think you should consider it more. Yeah. Heidi says, hey, question. I'm going to be doing a live TV news interview tomorrow AM. Given 24 hours, what should I get for equipment and what should I do for my background? I have a ring light. Heidi, first thing first, do not over makeup, but do not under makeup. 100% of the time, what I see with first time news, TV, video guests is they paint. So go gentle on makeup. Don't worry that, you know, that it won't read, you know, good eye makeup, good foundation, all that sort of thing, but don't go cuckoo. Number one. I'm curious, you know, some of Matt's take on this as far as background and all that. The number 1, 2, and 3 things I always tell every guest, and I'll throw it to Matt. My answers are really good sound counts a lot. And if you have less than 24 hours, maybe you can wing by a Best Buy or Walmart and see if they have an external mic there. And you're going to have to deal with what you get. Blue Yeti, Blue Snowflake, you know, one of those kind of mics, anything external that looks vaguely decent, even if they had like a lapel mic, which that's getting weird, but maybe Best Buy would have it if you have one of those. And then other than that, you know, the laptop camera is almost always decent enough, you know, in less than 24 hours. And then you had a ring light you mentioned, and a ring light's perfect. Put it in front of you, put it back like 5 or so feet, but not more than 5 feet from you. And that's my advice. Matt, what did I miss?
I was looking around to see if I could grab something in reach, but I don't have it. So Chris
you
is
get
right.
Up and walk off. Who's going to know?
if you certainly run to Best Buy and grab something, again, you don't have to go crazy. They probably have all the Yeti stuff in stock as a very popular retail brand. But if you can get something from Audio Technica too,
oh sure,
again, around the $50 to $100 range are the good ones. And even grabbing a inexpensive boom arm to mount it to, so it's not like right in your face or like right in the camera. You can kind of offset it, like $20 at like a music store if there's one in your area. But another thing, so Chris hit all the great points. You already have a light, which is like 100% something you need, and a lot of people miss. Chris has it up on the screen. Yeah, those are the Blue Yetis, are very popular.
So right here, the Blue Yeti Nano, which somebody told me was $200, but it's $99 right there. This is what I'm talking into right now. This mic right here, and it comes with like you could stand it on your desk. But like Mike's saying, Matt is saying, I had 2 best friends growing up, Mike and Matt. They were brothers. This arm, do not buy this $200 weirdness, but an arm like this is what really helps if you can. Or even one of these kind of doodads. So this is all just Best Buy. So if you got one of those nearby, so go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
This one's a little bit more price, maybe like $30 or $40. But this is actually for, and I'm not a musician, but this is like a drum. I'm told it's a drum microphone stand. It's got a very heavy bass, like bass to hold it, and you know I can put it up on my desk. Very, you know, you can move it around. It's very easy. But the one other critical thing to account for is if you can block out any of that reverb in your room wherever you're recording it. And I use moving blankets, and I put them over a light stand. You can even use a microphone stand, and you can just hang them, you know, in front of you, so at least it absorbs some of the sound while you're speaking. That would be like the only other tip, and that's cheap. You can just get blankets and throw it over a chair or something, you know, something like that.
Yep. It's funny you say that, because I actually like the reverby sound. So I actually, my entire house is all one big room except for the bathroom. One big room. So I am speaking out into a 16-foot ceiling vaunted space, which is why I'm basically eating the microphone, right? Because that fixes that. But I'm going to be doing an audiobook recording shortly for the 10th anniversary of Trust Agents. And I bought my kid like a memory foam topper for their mattress, and he hated it. He was like, I'm super not into this. I was like, that was like $100. You know, it wasn't like the best one. So, but it's sitting here because I didn't know what to do with it yet. Like I haven't thrown it out. It was just sort of in my closet. I had to go out of my closet to get something else. This is a small place. It's literally just sitting on the floor, like awaiting me to be better with trash. And so I'm going to use that to make the soundproofing, you know, like you said. So, oh, San Jose, you got Best Buy. You also, San Jose is right next to, Help. It's like the best tech store in the world.
Fry's.
Yeah. You know, you go to Fry's, they have 8,000 everything. Just don't let them go nutty with you. Just say like,
Yeah.
I'm going to spend about $100 on a mic. And by the way, Heidi, you're going to need the mic so much more. You're going to need it like so many more times than you think in the coming years, because we're now at a distance. It's why I dragged Matt on. Matt, I want to keep this briefish, just because, people don't stick around for too long on live shows as it is and all that kind of thing. When you're putting together a show, when you're putting together the kind of mindset of making a show, your point was, 12 episodes and you die and all that. Do you recommend, I've heard people have that thing where they ask that question, write out 20 or so episodes worth and see if you can, get 20 episodes worth of ideas of content before you even push the button. I've never done that. I just start and see what happens. But do you recommend that?
Look, some people are way better organizers than I am. And a lot of people need that approach to it. And if it works for you, it works for you. The problem is, and I did this in the beginning, and the problem is I'm just too, I don't know, like I chase a shiny object. So it's like I write everything out, and then I'm like 2 episodes in, I'm like, the heck with all that other stuff I just spent 3 hours writing down. I'm just going to chase this other thing. I saw a ball go by. I'm going to go after it and like talk to somebody, right? And that's like the kind of thing, because I don't do scripting with the shows. I'm actually in a course right now by a workshop by Jay Acunzo. And he's a fantastic podcaster, and he is very much methodical, logical. Everything makes sense, painting a better story, and it's great. But it's some of those things I just won't be able to apply. Like, I like more trendy stuff. And one of the killers that, and I fall victim to it all the time. Like right now, I have 4 episodes in the backlog of not my South
to be
Coast
edited.
Yeah, to be edited. And I have them there. And then as time is ticking on, like some of them are falling out of newsworthiness, like because things are changing so fast. It's like, whatever, like something just changed. Apple released the new phone yesterday. And all of a sudden that episode I recorded 2 months ago is pointless, because maybe we talked about, how Apple would never release a new phone or something like that. So that's the other thing. They get stale sometimes. And then you end up saying, I'm not going to publish it. And it's just wasted time for everyone. So, works for some people, doesn't work for me.
No, I could see that. And my, well, let me ask you the question instead of tell you mine. How has your philosophy on editing changed over the years? More, less, better? What do you do?
That's a fantastic question. Because what I'm trying to do, so like when we talk about microphones, for instance, you get to a point where, okay, you go and you buy a $75 microphone. This is $350. That microphone is whatever. This microphone is like whatever, 3 times ish more expensive than that mic. That doesn't make it 3 times a better sounding mic. It makes it like a 10-20% sounding mic. And that means I just don't have to, like I said yesterday, I don't have to turn all the knobs and dials to make it sound a little bit better. Right. And then when I'm on my show, the biggest problem I had editing my show was myself. Run-on questions, all of these filler words like I'm doing right now that just don't make sense. And it's about shutting up and letting the guest talk. And that dials back a lot of editing you don't have to do. Right? If you can control yourself and methodically think in a conversation to not do, because that just ruins the show, right? And it causes you more time to edit if you want to do it that way. And I spend a little bit of time doing that. I recently used an app called Descript, which is like this magical, I saw everybody talking about it. So it's this magical app. It edits the sound, and it'll go through and take out all of those filler words, the and I ran it on one of my episodes a couple weeks ago, and there was 500 instances of those words throughout the thing.
My gosh.
So like, I'm like, this is great. Half of me was like, all I gotta do is press this button and it'll remove all of them. And I did that. I pressed that button. It removed all the filler words. And then I started listening to the episode back. And there was so many of them pulled out that the conversation sounded awkward. It was like skipping, like it was like, it was just a skip because of all these filler words. So then this magical thing that was supposed to be this lifesaver was now I was like, well, now I got to do more editing.
Right.
Double
work.
Yeah, it was like double work. So it was, editing yourself, keeping it good at the source, the two good things for me.
You're absolutely right, though. Tom, by the way, came in and said hi. He said, really good to see us here. He's been dabbling with a local Facebook show, which is a blast. I think that's awesome. Finding that live vibe the best and remote is working really well since it got kicked out. And look, Tom Webster says, how to podcast when words with you not have way. Yes.
Love Tom. Webster. Tom's going to be one of those, he's going to be a comedian that you don't know about right now, but in the future.
Tom is lovable and super brilliant. When Tom reads his spam, it's a thing of glee.
Yeah.
Your points about stripping out is super vital, and your point about being a less talkative host. I work really hard on that one about the host one. Today, I was like, all my questions required setup. I needed to say like 5 things to get the thing. But the only difference is I would say, well, this is going to take me a second to explain so I can ask you the question I want to ask you. But even still, no one wants to hear the host. They want to hear the guest. That's why you have a show. That's an important lesson people don't know either, isn't it? That they don't know that if I've been on a lot of shows where the show ends up being the host telling their opinion to the guest and the guest having to nod. Yeah. So what's your take on that?
I was actually going to reverse it on you and ask you who you listen to that you take away from. And I'll give you my 2. It's your friend, Mitch Joel, from 6 Pixel Separation. Love his podcast. And the creator or co-creator of Billions, Brian Koppelman, which I think like everyone, anyone who's maybe, I guess, writing a book or an author or doing a script for a movie, are tuned into his podcast. And that's how I try to learn. I try not to learn from, not really that textbook kind of guy, just like listening to what other people doing and trying to absorb it. But I'm just curious, like, do you have somebody that you listen to that you take away from?
There's a bunch. I will answer as succinctly as I can. So one example I give a lot was there was this NPR show in the area, WBUR, called The Connection with Christopher Lydon. Christopher Lydon was one of the early podcast guys, like 2004 guys. Like he and Dave Weiner and Adam, why can't I think of his name? MTV, big guy, Adam Curry, was the kind of 3 grandfathers of podcasting, but Lydon doesn't get as much credit. His show, The Connection, was basically an interview show, and he would chomp and like step on guests all the time. He would step right over them as they're answering because he had a show to run and guests run long, and he was a pro at it. But I didn't get that. I thought, what a jerk, let them finish. And then he left the show. There was a big argument. He left in a huff. He started his own thing back when that wasn't easy to do. It was good, good for him. This new guy comes in. The new guy listens to everything the guest says, and the show just goes off the rails every single episode. And I'm just like, okay, I think there's a point, but I lost it because this guest just went, and like we've said a couple times in this episode, it is really hard to be a good guest.
Yeah.
And so, I think of that connection a lot. I try to think I would like to be a great host in that I can get the really good stuff out of somebody. I've got to learn to cut people if I need to keep guiding them somewhere. Yeah. So that's one of my favorites. Another is Terry Gross. I mean, from NPR again, like how, Fresh Air, like you can't get better than that. But I also like learning from people like Mark Maron. I some of the people that kind of went over the line. I'm not a Joe Rogan guy. Sorry, can't. I think Howard Stern, especially terrestrial Howard Stern, terrestrial radio, I thought was some of the most incredible interviewing in the world. 100%. And then beyond that, live contemporaries of us, almost anything that Tom Webster does, I'll listen to. Carrie Gargone, who is my co-host on the Backpack Show. And I do like to see how people approach and deal with their guests. Joe Jaffe has a show, Corona TV. I like to watch all his prep and his pre-work and all that. Jeff Brown, Read the Lead podcast. So I could do this for a while, but I'll stop.
Yeah. That's all. I think, so Brian Koppelman, the reason why I got tuned into Brian Koppelman was because I heard somebody say that he was great at interrupting guests, like you said, and moving the conversation on. And he does it fantastically. And sometimes people will like come on as guests and they'll be like, hey, they want to start talking about maybe billions for a quick second, and it's just great how he just like, he just cuts people off. He's like, well, they're not about me, or, we're talking about you. So let's highlight. It's a gracious way that he does it. And I just love it. And I love, because people hear things that you might say, and as a host, you go, oh, I know what Chris just said. My audience doesn't know anything about it. Right? Like you say, angel investing, right? And you're like, yeah, I got some angel investment. I started a company. Oh, wait, okay. So, but I know people are wondering, what is this angel investment thing? How did you get there? And then you kind of, break that down. Right. And you try to think of what those questions are your audience is thinking.
That was I did a 3-way interview with Andrew Warner from Mixergy, with Jeff Brown Reed the lead, and with Carrie Gorgon as the guests. And that's one of the things that I was surprised. Jeff Brown wants it to be audio only, even the interview. He doesn't want to do video interviews because he said that if you're going to listen to it in audio, I shouldn't have an advantage of being able to like wave my fingers and stuff at a person. Because what I was saying was the opposite. I was saying like, I want to wave you to be like, shut up. I'm going to ask you a question right now. But he said, don't do that.
Yeah.
So, on the way out the door, I have one last question for you. If you were helping someone brainstorm shows, what's your advice to get them started on a first podcast, which might not be the podcast they become known for the rest of their life?
The cliche is always, what is the goal? What is the goal with your podcast? And because I have these conversations, that's the number one question that I have with people like CASTOS is, my downloads aren't going up. Why? I want my downloads to go up. Okay. Why do you want these downloads to go up? And a lot of people just like, I don't know, like I just want more subscribers. We got to have something that we can measure, put something measurable in there. We talked about this yesterday, 1,000 fans, 100 fans, to me, your first 10 subscribers. And the easiest way to measure that is set up an email list. Like if you're talking to people on a podcast and you can't get 10 people to subscribe to an email address or an email newsletter, we're going to have a hard time reaching other goals with this podcast, right? Other than just doing it. And if it makes you feel good, fine, thumbs up, go for it. But most people are going to want to measure something to say, I'm going to keep doing this. So early days, you got to really deep down think about that goal. If it's just becoming a thought leader, even though we don't like that word, or recognized in a space, have a goal of just reaching more people, making that process easier.
I liked your goal with your own show, your South Coast show, We Are Here. I like the idea that the whole concept there is that you're using this to keep a thriving network going in that region, and that maybe you can hand over the network to people like your children to keep that going. I think that's a powerful goal. I think it's a biggie.
Yeah, I filter and I measure that. Sorry, one more. Statistically, I measure that by filtering those people into a Facebook group, because I can at least get a feeling that people are listening and they're going to talk about it in a Facebook group. And that's how I measure it from a analytics point of view.
I always think about the shows I want other people to make that there would be no benefit to having. Like, I think if Tom Webster, you mentioned his comedy, he's also into magic. I think if he had a show called A Funny Kind of Magic, I would watch it. But like, I don't, you don't know how long it's going to linger. But Matt Medeiros, you swung by, you did it. You came and did some CASTOS stuff and told me podcasting things. So thank you for doing it.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Moment's notice. One other thing I'd tell you is